Hello and welcome. I'm Rawia Alami and you're watching W News Extra, broadcasting live from Al Arabiya studios. These are our top stories. Republicans call for a full investigation into the latest Minneapolis killing by ICE agents as protests continue across the U.S. Meanwhile, a winter storm sweeps across the United States, resulting in at least 17 deaths, leaving many Americans without power. And striking gold, a historic rise for the precious metal, which reaches $5,000 an ounce for the first time ever, as investors turn to safe haven assets. Republicans have called for a full investigation after a second fatal shooting in Minneapolis by immigration officers. 37-year-old Alex Pretti, an intensive care nurse, was shot by ICE agents during protests in the city over the death of Renee Nicole Good. President Trump's team have defended the officer who shot Pretti, who they say was carrying a gun. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz has warned that America was at an inflection point. Take a listen.
So now we've got two Minnesotans dead. We didn't had time to start telling Renee's story of a poet and a mother and a bright spirit, and now we're telling Alex's story. So my question is, what's the plan, Donald Trump? What is the plan? What do we need to do to get these federal agents out of our state? You thought fear, violence, and chaos is what you wanted from us, and you clearly underestimated the people of this state and nation. If it was the intention of Donald Trump to make an example of Minnesota, then I'm damn proud of the example that the world's seeing. We believe in law and order in this state. We believe in peace. And we believe that Donald Trump needs to pull these 3,000 untrained agents out of Minnesota before they kill another person. And we're up here telling another story of a Minnesotan just trying to live their life without the interference.
To discuss this and all of today's stories, I'm joined by Al Arabiya editor Wissam Keyrouz and also Shane McGinley, news editor at Arabian Gulf Business Inside. Thank you for both of you for being on the show with us. I'll start with you, Shane. The pressure was definitely mounting on President Trump administration in this. Definitely. Even though we've heard recently, just in the past couple of minutes or a few minutes, that President Trump is actually considering pulling out the ICE agents from Minneapolis. What do you think he'll do?
I think he's doing like some of the press in just the last couple of seconds are calling it a definitive. But so let's kind of we don't know that 100%, but it looks pretty much like he is going to withdraw the 3,000 or so immigration agents. And I think if you look at what's been happening in the last sort of day, I think it's Trump regaining control of the narrative, because what we were looking at, there was a district court in downtown Minneapolis, and they were looking at whether the agents should leave. We were seeing calls, obviously, from the Democrat side, and the judge in this case was also appointed by Democrats. So like everything, it's very divisive in America, and it's which side of you are on. And there was a lot of people who were calling for these agents to be released, and there was even threats by the Democrat sort of U.S. Senate leader Chuck Schumer that he was going to sort of pull funding for the Homeland Department in the next vote on the budget. So I think Trump was looking at this, and obviously he likes to keep control. So I think it's him regaining control of the narrative and saying, okay, I'm pulling out the agents, so before he's told to do it.
Okay.
And that's a very Trumpian sort of move.
Let's go to Wissam to pick his thoughts on this very point. Wissam, what do you think President Trump is going to do? Even though he has already threatened in the past weeks to invoke the Insurrection Act, now he's going the opposite way, saying that he will consider pulling out the ICE agents from Minneapolis. Which way will he go, do you think? Oh. Okay, so we've lost Wissam. He's a bit frozen, but he's not in the U.S. right now with the winter storms. I don't know if so we have him back. Wissam, did you hear my question? I can hear you. Did you hear my question?
Yes, and I was answering. I was saying that I think that in line with what we know about Trump, he is definitely an adventurer. He's hard on his agenda, but he's not a gambler. And I think that Trump has seen that the limits of, although he has the mandate and he still has the mandate from some large swath of the American population to go on with his, you know, right-wing agenda, but he has been facing two stories of two American people. He was advocating the safety of Americans, and how can he face the story of a male nurse who is, a very good sign of, peaceful social worker. Anyway, let's not forget that Trump is always keen on backing down when he is faced with real challenge. But while doing this, he will say that I am winning. And this is very Trumpist. Having said this, we are facing an America that is so polarized and that is so an attention that hasn't been seen before for a long time. And we are expecting, we are waiting for elections to come. And I think Trump is not really in the mood of gambling with, what's going to come. Because for the first time, he has real opposition within the Republican clan about what's happening in Minnesota.
Right. Wissam and Shane, I tend to agree with you both that I think President Trump is going to pull back on this crackdown. We've seen it happen. We've seen him pull back at the last minute on so many different issues like Greenland, like Iran. But certainly, Wissam, definitely the issue has become very polarized. But how... Let's talk about the fractures that are inside the Republican camp regarding this.
Yeah,
how is it going to affect?
There's loads of them. Like if you look at, I thought it was an interesting quote from Marjorie Taylor Greene, who was a very sort of dogmatic Trumpian supporter, and now she's sort of, turned against him. And she was saying that both sides need to take off the political blinkers, and she said that you're all being incited into civil war. So that's quite a damning sort of quote from her. And I think a lot of the Republicans were saying, this is going too far. These are two American citizens that have been killed. And when you look at sort of two people dying in gunfire in America, there's so many people that are killed. But these are two very political deaths. And also what I thought was interesting in a lot of the newspaper reports that I read today was of that, in terms of the Homeland Department, that Trump himself didn't really have huge faith in his Secretary Kristi Noem, and there was a lot of sort of unnamed sources saying that she may be sidelined. So, but I kind of feel sorry for her because she may be used as the scapegoat, and she'll take the blame for it, be sidelined. And we're already sort of seeing this when the White House border security czar, as they're calling him in the papers, was appointed. So I wouldn't be surprised if she's the one that's pushed aside and is seen as sort of inefficient. And Trump doesn't like his subordinates who fail.
Of course not. Not. Okay, going back to Wissam. Wissam, to what extent do you think President Trump has the midterm elections in mind when he's considering whether to pull out the ICE agents from Minnesota to end this controversy, at least quiet things down at this point, especially when we are reminded that the immigration policies are central to his race in the midterm elections coming up?
He has been elected on an agenda that is very clear on the immigration, on many fronts, and he is delivering honestly on what he promised his electorate. But at the same time, Tim Walz was talking about an inflection point. Barack Obama was talking about a heartbreaking tragedy, and every single, person in the spectrum of the political spectrum of America is saying that what is happening is a bit wild for the, historical common American politics. Now, we know that Trump's agenda is wild, whether internally or externally. He has been on steroids politically, internally and externally. But we know also that he can back down. And if you want to project what's happening internally to the external, to the international scene, we have seen Trump in Greenland backing down very clearly when he has been faced with real strength or real unity from the Europeans. And whenever he is keen on exerting some kind of, he is accused of bullying, of course, but it's kind of extreme pressure, he always does it with parties and people he deems to be weak. He has been deeming the Europeans to be weak. He wasn't doing this with the Russian president or the Chinese president because he does not see them as weak. And this strength that is showing internally in America is definitely pushing him towards a safer zone. Will he back down from his agenda itself? I don't think so, because I believe immigration is definitely a problem in America, and a lot of Americans do believe this. And he is, what he is doing in Minnesota or other places, he is doing it against crime and against, illegal immigration. But the people that we are seeing dying are not within, this image. We are seeing, Americans who has lost their lives in a very tragic circumstance.
Right.
It's a narrative that is not what he wants to see right now before the elections.
Right. That leads me to the actual event we're talking about. We're talking about the tragic event. If we zoom in on it, the videos that we've seen, Shane, are very clear. The scenes are clear. What happened is clear. Yet it seems to me that the administration and the ICE agents are using justifications that
don't really make sense.
Not just don't make sense, they are contradictory to the political stance of the actual administration on certain issues like gun rights.
Well, exactly.
Because they were saying that, it was, the ICE agents was justified to shoot Alex Pretti because he had a gun, even though that gun was
exactly.
licensed.
When in a different argument they would support, it be the right to carry guns.
Exactly.
And what kind of annoys me particularly about the sort of narrative, and you're right, they would have generally probably called it fake news in another guise, except now we've got video evidence so it's a little bit hard. Even in the days of AI, don't think you can sort of fake to that level. But what does really annoy me is, with the last one with Renee Good, and now with this latest death, you see a lot of the press secretary Caroline Levitt saying that anyone who sort of hits out and sort of criticizes these deaths, then they're automatically seen as being sort of pro allowing sort of gang and aliens and sort of murderous sort of immigrants into the country. And I think that is a very simplistic view, and you can criticize these deaths without supporting what they're claiming that you do. And I think
without
that
causing
kind of
this polarization.
Yeah, exactly.
You're either for immigrants or against.
There's just no debate that seems to be possible in America at the moment. And I think Marjorie Greene's sort of statement that it's moving towards civil war, no longer seems like an outlandish conspiracy theory.
Well, thank you both for your thoughts on this. And now let's move on to another story. Winter storms have been sweeping across the U.S., resulting in the deaths of at least 17 people. Heavy snow and freezing temperatures have resulted in power cuts for thousands of homes from Texas to New England, and also flights have been canceled and schools and roads closed, with the storm affecting around 180 million Americans, more than half of the entire population. Right, we go back to you, Wissam. Many people have been affected, and there have been more than 17 deaths. We don't know the exact numbers, but I mean, these numbers are probably going to rise. What is so different and so bad about this storm this time?
Well, it's not just snow this time. It's a triple threat, because you have combination with heavy snowfall, you have the powerful winds, and you have the extreme cold. And you also have the surface, because it's sweeping across a large swath of America. It affects anywhere from Texas to the northeast, so it's really huge. Now we have extreme cold, and it's becoming very, very obvious that it is killing people, unfortunately. The storm is not ending anytime soon, because ice and snow are overloading the infrastructure. And this is basically the main problem now, where you see the down power lines, the frozen roads, the blocked emergency roads. It's everywhere in this area. But, we cannot see where is it going, because it's too cold. The snow is becoming it's freezing, it's becoming, ice, and we don't know how much it will last to melt. Now, having said this, America depends a lot on airports, on air traffic. And this is on a halt in many places, and this is affecting the very spirit of the economy, and it cannot stay. So we are seeing a lot of efforts, and we are seeing a lot of, we are seeing also what's happening in New York. We have heard Zahran Mamdani, but I have a little point to make, which is a little bit, human and political. One of the most, striking images of this is when you hear about people dying of cold, basically. And dying from cold is always one of the most miserable expressions of, misery. And it is not supposed to happen in countries that powerful, that rich like America. So a country that is projecting that much strength and power across the world has marginal people who are dying from cold. And this is not something that it should happen, basically.
Well, also you would have the people who advocate for climate change and reducing the carbon print of every country.
Whenever you have ice and you have snow, you have people who really don't believe in climate change, and will say, you see, we still have very, very cold winters, so this whole thing about climate change is not true. But the science goes the other way. They say it's because of climate change that we have more extreme winters and more extreme summers.
Right.
This is what the science says.
Yes. Well, we've heard also, Shane, from so many different officials commenting on, how bad this storm is and how it's affecting half of the population, at least, of the United States. Not just in states that are used to this, but also in other states that don't get such cold weather, like in Texas and other states as well. But Zohran Mamdani, the mayor of New York, had something to say about this.
Yeah, there was 5 people unfortunately died on Saturday, and they haven't come out with the cause of the death. But he did say that it's a stark reminder that every year New Yorkers succumb to the cold, which is just what Wissam was saying, that it's a miserable death to succumb, and this sort of story has panned across the world. Like last night, I was at the Emirates Festival of Literature. And a lot of the American authors were, their flights were being sort of disrupted, trying to get back from Dubai to New York. And just before we came on air, I spoke to AGBI's US editor, and she was snowed in Washington, D.C. So it's a hectic time. But I think going back to our first story and, sort of US protests, and I think the Trump administration is probably looking at this 2 ways. One, the bad weather means that people are less likely to go out in the cold and protest against various different things. Yeah. But at the same time, the cold makes you very angry, and then you're more likely to get annoyed about what's happening in the country, depending on which side you are.
It's power outages as well. Yeah. People are not getting electricity or heating or anything as well.
Exactly, and a lot of I think it's like half the states have now declared emergencies. And to bring it back to Trump, because everything always comes back to Trump, remember that. I looked back through some of the clippings, and I don't understand like some sort of conspiracy theories, but when you look at sort of like in December, the Washington Post was saying that a lot of the funding for the National Weather Service had been cut, and there was redundancies. And you remember all of this sort of the big government cuts that Elon Musk back in the day was advocating, and even back in May there was cuts being made to the Weather Service. So yes, this is an unprecedented level of weather and storm and snow, but if you don't have these sort of checks and balances in place, and you're not able to forecast these things, then you can't have preparation. And unfortunately, if you try to make efficiencies, sometimes you cut the fat a little bit too lean, I would say.
Yeah. You cut too much and then you regret it. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for your thoughts on this. And we'll be moving to another story now. Iran has unveiled a new mural in Tehran's city center, warning the U.S. against a military strike. The painting features damaged planes on an aircraft carrier. Written on a mural in English and Farsi, the words, "If you sow the wind, you will reap the whirlwind." It comes as Trump moves naval assets to the Middle East. Right, we'll start with you, Wissam. This is definitely a very clear public warning to the U.S. from Iran. I mean, how do you read it? And is it more addressed internally than it is to externally to the United States?
Well, obviously, I mean, the Iranians, it's a propaganda after all. They are talking about, the necessity to sense the winds. If anyone should sense the winds, in this case, it's the Iranians themselves. There is a huge armada of ships and a huge firepower coming towards Iran. And there is plenty to believe that something is going to happen. It is likely for many analysts that Iran will be, there is strike coming from the Americans, that this strike was about to happen, a couple of weeks ago, and it was stopped the last minute by Trump himself, who has ordered the strike. Why did he stop that? Then it's because he had an advice from, his team. He asked, will this strike by then, and we didn't have the USS Lincoln in the region by then, will it be decisive? And the answer was clear. It was not. It won't be decisive. This is why he backed down. And even the Israelis themselves were not very keen on a strike that will not really make a big change. Having said this, I do believe that the Iranian regime, from a regional standpoint, has already fallen. The whole system, from the southern suburb of Beirut to the Syrian regime to many other areas, even in Iraq, this whole system of Iranian regional dominance has collapsed. And for this to continue in the mind of people in Washington, and mostly also people in Israel, it has to arrive to Tehran itself. Now, the regime is weak, definitely, and I do believe that the violence that has been shown to the protesters is also a sign of weakness, because the regime needed to remind people, mostly internally, that we are still strong, we still hold. Now, the 11 days war between Israel and Iran stopped because the Americans said it has to stop, and the Americans then opened a window for negotiation.
Right.
This window was open and did not lead anywhere.
Right. Thank you, Wissam. I'll go back to you, Shane. All this is going on while the blackout and internet blackouts are continuing in Tehran and in the whole of Iran. I mean, this is, even though the protests have quietened in the past few days, yet the blackout is still there.
Yeah, and I think I've kind of looked at it in two ways as usual, because I always sit on the fence sometimes. But if you look at sort of the Arab Spring that we had in this region before, it showed that Facebook and the internet and social media did help in coordination and getting messages out. But then I also think in this part of the world, they had regime change and revolution long before the internet happened. So I think there's ways around it. But also I think cutting the internet is not going to sort of solve the problem. It's just putting a plaster on it. And the son of the Iranian president came out and just said as much. He gave a great quote saying, "Shutting down the internet will not solve anything. We will just postpone the issue." So the images will come out. The numbers will eventually come out. And there was also some numbers came out from an organization, and it was through the Guardian. It was the Iranian Computer Trade Organization, who said that closing down the internet was costing the country about 20 million, because you think like e-commerce, retail, can't continue in this day and age without the internet. So then you're already denting an economy that is already suffering. And the reason that the people came out and protest in the first place is because of economic hardship. So by cutting the internet, you might be solving one problem, but you're also stoking the base of what caused your problem in the first place. And inflation is already huge at 42%. So I don't think this policy is really working for the Iranian regime, to be honest.
Right. Okay, let me go back just for one final point to Wissam. Wissam, how is the President Trump's views and his latest position regarding Iran, how is it impacting the region here in the Middle East?
Well, ironically, and a clear geopolitical paradox, many of the natural foes, or let's say, people who were not really friends across the last few decades with Iran, are now the very people who are advocating not to strike Iran. Because we heard mostly also from Turkey, who is close, as a neighbor to Iran, who has been very vocal in saying, don't strike Iran. We also hear about, people in the Gulf who are not really keen on having such a huge earthquake in the region, a change that could have unexpected results. Having said this, even those who are afraid of something that big to happen are also thinking that if it happens, we need to be ready for it, whether
Right.
it is Turkey or the other people in the region. And anything that happens, the biggest question is what would be the alternative? The main narrative in the region is that any alternative to this regime would have to be within the regime itself. The Shah, or the son of the Shah, is not accepted by a lot of people because of his Persian reference. Now we need to know what would be the alternative, and it's not clear.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much for your thoughts on this. We're going to move on to another story. The price of gold has risen above $5,000 an ounce for the first time ever. Geopolitical tensions are thought to be behind the historic jump, with strained relations between US and NATO, as well as the ongoing conflicts in Gaza and Ukraine. Gold and other precious metals are seen as a safe haven asset, or safe haven assets that investors flock to in times of financial uncertainty. Also, silver rose on Friday to over $100 an ounce, building on its ongoing rise. I'm going to start with you, Shane. This is definitely a huge milestone for gold. For the first time ever, it jumps the $5,000.
Exactly,
mark.
the end of last year, nobody would have thought that it would go so high, and a lot of the predictions are that, it'll go even higher. And I'm sort of going to go out and say, will it go to 6,000? AGBI did a story on it at the moment. We spoke to a lot of analysts today. They're predicting 5,500. So I would go and push and say it might go to 6. I didn't think it'd go to 5, but I think it might. And it leads all back to.
You're very optimistic.
I am optimistic, and I think it's because, like you just said, like gold powers ahead during uncertainty, and when the dollar goes down, automatically then gold goes up, and it's linked to all of our earlier stories. What's happening in Iran, what's happening in the US with the turbulence on the markets, the Trump taco, sort of what people are talking about, Greenland. And I looked back, like at Liberation Day in April, I think it was the 2nd of April last year, it was 3,133, and people were talking about 4,000 at that point, which that's up by at least 2/3. Silver has zoomed even more than that. I think it's like doubled like in the last 2 months. And then also, like, governments around the world are really nervous about the uncertainty that's happening, and international reserves are at their highest for like 30 years. And that's in physical gold. Then there's ETFs, investors, that's up like 47%. So I think, I didn't think at the end of last year that it could go much higher, but I think do you think the uncertainty in the world is going to end suddenly by the end of this year?
I don't.
If you don't believe uncertainty is going to end, then gold is going to keep rising.
Well, it doesn't seem so. Especially we still have 3 more years of President Donald Trump being in office. But Wissam, so we know that definitely people, investors, even just lay people, they go for gold, silver, precious metals as a safe haven, usually at the time of great uncertainty. But what makes it such a safe haven that everybody is resorting to at this stage, that it would push it, the demand for it would go up, pushing it to over $5,000 for an ounce?
Well, allow me first to disagree with this assumption that people are buying because of uncertainty. Most of people are buying, especially not the investors or the bank or the governments, are buying because FOMO, fear of missing out. People don't want to miss out the opportunity of making money out of gold because they hear people like us saying it's going to be 6,000, it's going to be 8,000. And now we have some people like the man who predicted money of the crisis, Kiyosaki, who's saying it's going to reach $27,000. Wow. So we have all this frenzy. So people are, buying the frenzy also.
They want they want a piece of the cake, I suppose.
Exactly. It is happening. Why aren't we part of it? So allow me to go back to history a little bit. When the great conquistador Hernan Cortés arrived to Mexico from Spain, and he met the Aztec leader, and he said, I want gold. He said, why want gold? He answered, I have an illness in my heart that only can be cured by gold. And we have to ask ourselves, what is that illness in the heart of the world that demands this kind of cure, which is that amount of gold? Well, I would say it's because there's so much uncertainty. It's because we are losing collectively as a society the trust in the money system, because everything's changing. Technology is taking us somewhere else. So why the money system will be there? So we need to cling to something that is tangible. It's not going anywhere, and that is gold. And gold is not going anywhere, and unfortunately also uncertainty is not going anywhere for the foreseeable future. So we can only expect things to continue. Having said this, there is a smell of bubble. You can never rule out the possibility of bubble, because when everybody in the society, the rich and the poor, and even the poorest, are pouring into this opportunity and talking about investing in gold, it means the people high up already made their share, and it could crumble anytime. Let's not, rule out the possibility of a bubble. It is a possibility, unfortunately, and maybe a lot of people could lose money after so many people made that much money.
Right. Okay, go back to you, Shane. People are definitely investing, even lay people, not necessarily investors. People like me and you are investing in precious metals. What should they be looking out for? And is it better to put your money in silver now?
I think
because its price is accelerating in terms of percentage much higher than silver.
I think it is, and what I thought was interesting on Reuters was that you can put it into the metals themselves, but you can also put it into like the shares of the mining companies. So I invested in, say, copper is going up loads, so I put it into the shares of copper miners, and you can also get ETFs of copper miners. Mining companies around the world, those have gone up spectacularly as well. So a lot of what you want to look at is who's going to benefit from the metal going up. So I wouldn't put into, say, like jewelry companies, because their costs are going up. So I would sort of take your money out of those and put it into the mining companies.
But then silver is part of the manufacturing of so many different things, so microchips, phones.
So their costs are going to go up. So that in theory, if their costs go up, then the profits will go down. So you got to look at those companies as ones that will bear the brunt of it. But I think silver probably will go a little bit more as well. I think gold will as well. But you got to look at who's going to benefit from this. Right. But also, I think you got to look at the other metals that I was looking at this morning that are also better, like palladium. All of these other metals that are kind of benefiting from this massive surge.
Right. Okay. Before we move on to another story, I wanted to ask you. You can definitely say one last thing, Wissam. I wanted to ask you: should investors, or at least lay people who want to invest in precious metals, invest in physical gold or silver, or go to banks?
The very reason why gold is becoming so valuable, it's because it is physical. So I would say, yes, get the physical gold. A lot of people will not say this, will say, okay, you can go to the electronic platforms, whatever. But what I would want to say is that what we see in the world right now in the market is paradox, is the two bets. So on one side, you have people betting on the metals, on gold, on the very tangible value. And the other side, you have people betting on cryptocurrency, which is the most crazy, volatile, incomprehensible by many. So you have, the roots and the wings. So you have you are either investing in what is tangible and was there since ever and will stay forever, or into the new idea that is completely new. I would say if you want to buy gold, my idea, and I was talking to a colleague today, and maybe because there is the possibility of, you know, the prices going high again. So
Right.
not to miss out, just put a little 10% of your pool of investment into gold. This is what I would say.
Well, I'm going to do this.
Yeah, no,
Certainly. Thank you so much for both of you on your thoughts on this. Now it's that time of the show where Shane and Wissam have chosen two of their quirkiest stories, or maybe not very quirky. We're going to start with Wissam. Your story,
quirky, but
your story seems sad to me because it's about a study that found why genuinely nice people don't have close friends. This is sad.
well, let's start by saying, you know, we choose happiness and kindness, whatever. Okay, kindness
Regardless.
is the most important value, regardless. But, you know, this study is striking, but maybe it will ring a bell and you'll remember a lot of people, you know. Apparently, if you are too kind, you are likely to have less friends. Why? Because people will assume that you are okay and you are the one who gives everything and you don't need. So a lot of people who are too kind will struggle to have many friends. But, you know, we still choose kindness regardless. And friends who will have, you know, will be friends with the kind people, be real friends. So we choose kindness, but this is a very, you know, unexpected study where, you know, you don't seem to believe that people who are kind have less friends, but apparently, yes, people who are kind have less friends.
And that means that people who are mean have more friends? Because, I mean, these studies, they keep
I'm a bit worried because
publishing these
I was
studies.
always proud of the fact that I had a large circle of friends, so I'm kind of worried about what that means.
That you're not very agreeable, not very nice. But I actually read a study.
I mean, achieve more in life, you know, because, you know, people, they just, you know, tend to give them what they want because they are mean.
Yeah, I suppose. But the thing is, I mean, there are so many studies out there. I read a study that sort of looked at popularity of teenage kids in schools, and they found out that people tend to be more popular when they like more people.
Yes.
So it's kind of, I don't know if it's related.
That was Vanessa Van Edwards uses that study a lot too, as a sort of social commentator. But yeah, I've heard about that. So I don't agree with that theory, to be honest, because I think if you look at a lot of the Mean Girls kind of shows, they're generally not that nice. But I don't know. It's been a lot. Maybe it's changed since I've been in high school. You never know.
But I mean, it does make sense that once, if as a teenager, you're not that judgmental of other people, you tend to be more open, and therefore you talk to more people. You ask, you know, you ask how are they today, and therefore they tend to like you more.
Well, actually, when I was at the Lit Fest, there was a professor from London Business School, and he studied happiness, and he was sort of saying that. The problem nowadays is that a lot of people stick to people who have the same views and are very similar to them, and that we need to have a more diverse set of friends.
Okay.
So I would agree with that.
Great. So before we're pressed on time, Shane, your story is about a very daring sky-high climb.
Yes. It's about an American guy called Alex Honnold, I think is how you pronounce it. He went up the 101 floors of Taipei 101, and he did it in record time. He did it in 1 hour, 31 minutes, which halves the record previously by the French guy, the Spider-Man. And I just think it's absolutely bonkers. And he said at the end, one word, he described it as sick.
He described it as sick.
Yeah, which I think is probably slang for, like, you know,
amazing. That it was really cool.
But I didn't watch it. But it was the talk of our office this morning, and one of my friends was just saying that it was live streamed, not live streamed. It was on. It
was live streamed on Netflix.
It had a gap
wasn't
in case it went wrong. But yet everyone was saying like they felt sick watching it, and I think there was an interesting documentary that was done on this gentleman a while ago, and it showed that when he was looking at sort of scary things, his brain didn't trigger the same things as you and me. So I think he just needs a bigger adrenaline rush.
That explains it, to be honest with you, because doing such a climb with no safety equipment whatsoever. I mean, I wonder, how did he get insurance without, when he wanted to do this without any safety equipment.
Or Netflix
anything.
as well, like, if...
And that is a first. Netflix doesn't usually.
They don't normally do that stuff. And the actual sort of event itself had to be delayed because it was too wet originally to do it. So he had to delay it by a day, which kind of makes you even more worried. And I've been to that tower before, and it is an interesting sort of architecture that you think you could cling on to it. But I live on the 7th floor of a building. I don't even like going quite close to my balcony, so that just terrifies.
Well, definitely, it makes sense that he has something different inside his brain regarding fear and obviously heights than the rest of us. Anyways, thank you so much for these lovely stories. Thank you to our guests, Al Arabiya editor Wissam Keyrouz and Shane McGinley, news editor at Arabian Gulf Business Insight. That's it from us on W News Extra. Don't forget always to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on X. That's goodbye from me, Rawia Alami.